Oh my. Guess what? We're being set up by God. We don't want to go, but he's taking us. I should say your flesh doesn't want to go. That side of you that wants to be in control and safe and have it all figured out. The Lord's shaking all of that up. He's trying to move us into a place where we're going to learn some things about walking with him that are going to take us into the greatest dimensions of things prepared before the foundation of the world that we could imagine. He has to have a people through whom he can do this. And so he's actually being very kind to us in the shaking. And we're going to see where this all goes. But I want to talk to you. I'm going to have to probably just do part A on this. But I want to talk to you about managing our contradictions. Some of you are saying, I don't want to hear this. What is it that creates contradiction in our lives? Well, it's having a vision, having a dream, having a word from the Lord, and you're moving forward with him, but then circumstances get in the way and impossibilities seem to start taking over. And what you thought was going to happen is now going in reverse, seemingly. And now stuff starts happening inside of you. Are you relating to what I'm talking about? When we get into the middle of contradiction, we are never happy. We're frustrated. We get angry. We say some things to God that we want to take back later. Walking through the reason why we even get a setup for contradiction is that we're choosing to walk by faith and not by sight. We're choosing to grab a hold of something with God. And he's spoken to us about our future, a preferred future with him. And it has produced hope in us, and we're moving forward, but then stuff happens and now it looks like everything's lost. And we're at that point where we just say, God, I wish you had never started this process at all. The Israelites, if you know that story, God brought the Israelites out of Egypt in such a phenomenal way. If you had had a chance to live through some of those works of God that he did, you would just be in shock and awe, and then the final act was being brought through the Red Sea and then watching the water cover over all of their enemies. And as Moses says, those Egyptians that have been oppressing you for the last 400 years, you will never see them again. And so they know that God has promised them, I brought you out to bring you in to a land of promise, a land flowing with milk and honey that I had spoken to your forefather, Abraham. I'd given that land to him, and he believed me, and he walked the land with me. And where he set his foot, I gave it to him. And now you, as his descendants, who are more numerous than the stars of the sky, I am now bringing you in to receive an inheritance that was promised. And you're gonna have the joy of knowing what that's like. So they're on their way. And there were a few contradictions on the journey. For instance, there was no water in one place where they camped out. Now, they were following a cloud. They were following God in their midst. He was as this massive pillar of cloud during the day. And then at night, that pillar would turn into fire in their midst, a pillar of fire. Now, you would think reasonably that if you were there in their midst and you saw that, you would conclude, God's with us. His power is with us. He's doing something intentional, right? you would think. But our problem is our thinking. Because your thinking can go in all kinds of directions according to your previous fears, according to other kinds of things that you've experienced that didn't go so well for you, ways that you've been oppressed in the past, ways that you've experienced lack in the past. And so you're going to enter into a battle royal within yourself when God is taking you through from point A to point B according to his promise, and you've stepped out with him. But then things come that you're not expecting. And in this case, in this one situation, the cloud had been leading him through the wilderness and a desert area. And the cloud stops and says, we're camping here. Now, what do you do when God decides to stop where there's no water? Well, at first you say, well, we're moving tomorrow, surely. But the cloud doesn't move. And Moses ain't moving either. And so you go another day and you say, well, you check your water reserves and what you brought with you, and you're checking in with your neighbor, and in case I run out, do you still have, and everybody's still high-fiving each other and saying, yep, God who brought us out, we're going. And you get up the next day and the cloud's still not moving. Moses isn't packing up the tent. But now your water reserves are getting down to the bottom. Guess what's also happening to your trust? See, everything that you think you believe about God's goodness, everything you think you believe about him is now getting stretched, now getting tested. Can you feel the pain? And then your kids start coming to you and saying, I'm thirsty. And you're looking at what's left in the bottom of the bag and you're saying, well, I can give you half a cup today. You get up the next day and the cloud's not moving. Guess what you're in the middle of? Contradiction. Now, guess where the Israelites went with it? They start grumbling and complaining to Moses. They start saying, we've changed our mind about you. We don't think you're a good leader. And we're starting to change our mind about that pillar. And the grumbling and complaining was getting so intense, and they're coming to Moses saying, you got to move us out of here. And God says, Moses said, I don't move until God moves, because that's where the blessing is. If I move outside of God's presence and his will, we're on our own, and you don't want to be there. But that fear starts coming up, that spirit of poverty, that fear of death, all of these limitations and past experiences and everybody who died of thirst in the past, and all this stuff starts coming up and it starts talking to you. And guess what? It's all reasonable. It all makes sense. Your natural mind starts giving you the logic of death and destruction and helplessness. See, now they're at the point where the water bag is empty. Even their animals are mooing at them, maybe they start seeing some of the animals kind of start to lay down because they don't have any more strength. And now they're calculating and just saying, we don't have enough water left if we wanted to make a run back to Egypt. See, and then this is when anger starts rising up in you, and judgment. This is when you find out what's really inside of you. And the scripture tells us there in Exodus 17, where this is recorded, is that God was actually testing them. Now, was he being cruel? No, none of them were keeling over yet from they weren't dying of thirst, but the fear of dying of thirst, because they were calculating without God. Because they started making judgments about God. And then they started making this statement: did God bring us out here to kill us? Now, you and I would say, oh, well, if we had been there, we would have never said anything like that. Because we have it deep in our hearts that God is good. He'll never fail you, never leave you. He'll never, he always makes sure there's enough, except when God's not moving. And it looks like you're trapped now in your circumstances. You start interpreting the circumstances. You start counting your tea leaves. You start trying to read into the future according to all kinds of things. And so everything starts coming up in them saying, did God bring us out here to die? Because it was the only thing that made sense to them. Now, part of it is that the gods that were worshipped in Egypt were the kind of gods that would do that to you. If you didn't please them, they would actually set you up and kill you. The Egyptians lived in constant fear of their gods. They always hoped that somehow their gods would bless them, but they also knew their gods couldn't be trusted. So they lived in constant fear and tension with the gods that they served. And they even said Pharaoh was a god. And we all saw what Pharaoh did. He's not a good guy either. He just likes to wield power. And so now they're in a battle about what they believe about gods. And who is this God that has brought us out like this with such display of power and has chosen us and fulfilling the promise that he made to our father Abraham and has delivered us out in unbelievable possibilities? He's brought us out and even opened up the Red Sea for us to bring us through. And by the way, they were also getting manna every day at this point. And God had also brought in a whole bunch of birds for them to have meat to eat. They saw that miracle too. So all these other needs are being met, but there's no water. So their mind starts calculating in the contradiction. I want to say to you, we have to manage our contradictions, or we're going to end up on the wrong side of I want to tell you that I wrote it down here. All of God's best plans for us are on the other side of impossibility. If God is going to bring you into that which is impossible, but it's his absolute best because it's him doing it for you and with you, he has to walk you through impossibility. He has to walk you through what is impossible for men, but only possible with God. But in the middle of that, he has to test everything in us that cannot believe that God ultimately would take us to that place. And so he leads us into what looks like contradiction. So they were saying, is God among us or not? While they were standing next to the pillar. If God is really here, why isn't he doing anything? Okay, now you're getting even more quiet. You can see it's a real problem. It's a real tension for us. And some of you wish I'd just shut up right now because you don't want to hear this. I guarantee you have a contradiction in your future. Probably more than one. See, we serve a God who likes to birth a vision in us, but very often then he kills it so that he can then rebirth it with only him making it happen and not you. I want to tell you that's what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now. What's going on in our nation right now? Rebirths only come after something dies. But what's really dying? Our control. The way we think. Our power, our ability. Our pride to say, look at what I'm going to do. Watch me make it happen. See, I wrote a book called The Art of the Deal. The art of the comeback. But what if God kills all the deals and kills all the comeback? And when every possibility is exhausted, and it looks like there is no possible way, everything's locked down, everything has been, and God comes out of nowhere and says, are you all dead yet? Now watch me. And suddenly his promise comes alive in a whole new way. You see, you and I we tend to look at the promises of God, the possibilities of God through our flesh, through our possibilities, through our whatever it is about us that needs to get some glory out of the thing. And God wants us, actually in his kindness, to see his glory. Because if you never see his glory, and you never see his power, you'll never fully trust him for the bigger things that are coming. You'll always be leaning into yourself or into somebody else. But I tell you the truth, there are things that only God can do that you were made for. And if he loves you, he'll set you up for that. But often he takes us through the vision, the depth of the vision, the contradiction, so that when we have exhausted everything and we have nothing left but God himself, even after we've given up, then suddenly he comes and we see him in a way we've never seen him, according to his power, his wisdom, his ways of doing things that are far exceed our ways. See, but here's the bigger picture. God is preparing you and I to rule and reign with him for eternity. It would really help if you and I knew how to let him lead. If we absolutely trusted him with every ounce of our hearts, because we love him and we know he is good. And we learn how to cooperate with him so that he can just do whatever he wants to do. When we learn how to start doing that, he starts loosening the reins a little bit. And I love it. He says, you know me and you know my ways, you know my voice, you know my heart, you trust in me. Now I want to see what you can do. So we're actually growing up to become mature sons and daughters. So these Israelites are out there, they're grumbling, they're complaining, they're screaming, they're angry. They are terrified because all they can now see is the clock ticking, and they're all just going to die of thirst out there. The water reserves are all gone. What do you do? So God listened to Moses. Moses came and said, God, I'm not sure what you're doing, but I trust you. I'm out of water too. What do I say to the people that are ready to stone me? And God says, I know. I tested them. They failed. But I'm still good. And I'm still going to get them to the promised land. So I want you to take that rod that I gave you back at the burning bush. That rod that I had you throw down, which was the last part of your identity as a man. That rod I had you throw down and it became a snake, and then I had you pick it up again by the tail. And when you did, it became a rod, but then it became my rod. See, ultimately, when God's leading us through these contradictions, he's trying to get us to lay down those last pieces of us that's our identity connected to our strength, so that then he can take over, and then we pick it up. And now you've got a piece of God that you never had before. Now you've got an authority that you never had before. You have an understanding about God, and you can walk with him in a new way. Take that rod and go strike the rock. So he goes, and God showed him the rock. Now, follow me with this. In your natural mind, would you take a stick and hit a rock to get water? Now, if I had a jackhammer, or if but why would I even think that this big rock slab here would have water? Because you see, we're in a desert. The natural mind is not able to, and there wasn't any geologist around with, scopes and other kinds of things to be able to say, yeah, there's some water down under the ground here. If we just go hit that rock. So Moses does the opposite of what makes sense. He has no idea. He has never seen anything like this before, except God said, go hit the rock, water will come. And so he does. He brings all the elders with him, and they're probably thinking, Moses has really lost his mind now. That's why we're about to die. But he hits the rock. Enough water comes out to be able to take care of everybody, their animals, fill up all the water bags and all the rest. They're all taken care of. Nobody died. Lo and behold, the cloud's moving now. But Moses named that place Marah and Meribah. Meribah meaning quarrel, argument with God. Argument and anger, frustration over not being in control. And Marah referring to, I forgot the other one, sorry. What's that? No, that's a different one. Sorry. I'm not in my Bible here. It'll come later. Testing. Marah referring to the word testing. God tested them, but they didn't pass the test. Now, they didn't know that within another 40 years, they're going to come right back to this same spot. And it was going to happen all over again, just before they were going to cross the Jordan to go in, take the promised land. And guess what happened then, too? They were in the exact same spot. And there was no water. And they just repeated the entire cycle. You see, we have a hard time learning this stuff. We have a hard time really trusting God in the contradiction. But the water came. So here's my question to you. When you're in the contradiction, when they were in this contradiction, what were they supposed to do? How do you manage your contradictions? What do you do when you are in the place where it looks like your vision is dying beyond resurrection? Well, if you move into your natural thinking, if you move into your history, you're going to get into trouble, right? But you could, there's always a choice, you could strengthen yourself in the Lord in the moment and say, okay, obviously the facts are there's no water. The facts are there's no way to get any water. The facts are everything is out of reach. Everything is out of my power right now. So I have to decide something about the truth. I've got the facts, but what's really true? They could have looked at that pillar, but they didn't yet know this about God. God was actually training them to learn how to trust him and move into the weapons of warfare against contradictions. They could have looked at that pillar and said, well, God is among us. What God are we talking about? Are we talking about the gods of Egypt? No. We're talking about the God who came, who is the God of our father Abraham, and who led us out by a mighty outstretched hand, who can open up an entire Red Sea for a nation to walk through and then close over our enemies. That is the God who is here in this pillar. And what did we experience when God did that? Oh, I remember when we came through the Red Sea and we were on the other side and we watched the water go over our enemies and we were completely set free at that point. I remember we were singing. I remember we were dancing. I remember we were praising God. I remember we were getting revelation about this God unlike we had ever known before, that he is good, that he is merciful, that he is taking care of us, that we are the apple of his eye and he loves us. Therefore, what I see right now is not reality. What I'm thinking is about to happen is not reality. I may be looking at facts in the natural, but there's something that's more true. I can't control God, but I can trust him. I can't control the circumstance, but I can sing. I can dance. I can praise. I can declare. See, this is what I think God's shown me. If they had begun to dance again the way they had danced after they came through the Red Sea, if they had begun to say, there's no water here, but our God himself is water. And they started thinking impossible thoughts with God, like, you know what? We don't even need water. God can sustain us. We won't die of thirst. We're going to live because God has brought us this far and we didn't come this far to come this far. And you start thinking with God and using your Holy Spirit logic. And you start declaring things that make sense according to what God has already done and the revelation you have of him right now about how good he is and how much he loves you. And you're speaking the promises of God over your life and saying, yep, has God kept his promises up until now? Yep. And they start having high five parties. They start celebrating. We're going to Canaan. Who needs water? We got milk and honey. Now, you know what? That's absolutely insane. But they do have that choice. And I believe what the Lord's shown me, if they had started beginning to worship God and declare the goodness of God, they would have heard the sound of. They wouldn't have needed a rod. The rod was the backup plan for unbelieving people. And I want to tell you, there's a lot of people looking for a rod to show up right now in America. And everybody's trying to figure out, well, what's God doing right now? And people are going back and finding stories in the Bible, where, well, things didn't always work out and the people didn't do enough and they didn't repent enough and what we didn't do enough so that God won't do something, and all this speculation and calculation, all the rest, and nobody knows nothing. And I'm personally tired of it. You see, God spoke some promises. And yes, there is no water. There seems to be no power. There seems to be no path. And some people are still looking for a rod somewhere. Someone's going to show up and strike a rock. Next week, the military's going to come. I don't care how God does anything. See, if they just had kept their eyes on Canaan, on the promise, and they let their history with God, as limited as it was, but far more than you and I have right now, actually, with what they saw. If they had let it speak into the moment of the contradiction and then moved from sight to faith again and opened up their mouths and began to say, I will not die, but live. If God be for me, who can be against me? God who brought me this far will continue to bring me. I don't know how he's going to do it, but it's sure going to be fun to watch him. Now, why would he do that? Oh, that's right. I forgot. It's just me. Unworthy little me. Yeah. Why would God value me more than anybody else has ever valued me? Why would God keep his promise when others have not kept theirs? Why would God not abandon me when others have abandoned me? And you and I've got to settle some things in our heart right now. God's going after the things in us that are full of lies about us and how God sees us. And God's going after every little lie inside of us that we believe about him. And if you got stuff bubbling up to the surface and your things are coming out of your mouth and you find yourself depressed and angry and frustrated and your God's not looking too good right now, it's God just putting a little pressure on you to reveal what's in the tube. That would be the mercy of God, actually, to save us from ourselves. The problem is that when you're in the contradiction, your emotions just try to overtake you, and you start despairing, and you get depressed, and you feel like you just can't shake all of that. And I was in that place yesterday, and I knew I got to go take a walk with God. So I got out, took a long walk with the Lord, and I could just feel this stuff just trying to pile on me, and just negative. It's bad. It's bad. And, evil workers are doing their stuff, and hating evil and hating the power of evil. And I realize I'm getting so focused on evil that I'm losing sight of my God, my Father. So I knew I got to go visit Papa. I'm just going to go for a walk with him. I'm going to let him tell me what's going on. And I just pressed into that place with him. in the contradiction. And I just said, Lord, if there's anything I know right now above anything else, you are God and you are good. And you've never failed me. So I have a reason to believe some pretty amazing things right now. So I'm going to harness my reason to your power. I love it that God came to Jeremiah and he said, in Jeremiah's contradiction, he said, I'm the God of all flesh. Is there anything too difficult for me? When God asks you that question, he's not expecting you to pontificate. He's inviting you in to think with him and to come to a new conclusion. Because God only asks that question when you and I are in the difficulty that we think is bigger than us. Is there anything too hard for me? That actually in the Hebrew it says, is there anything you're going through right now that's threatening to undo you that is greater than my wonderfulness, my extraordinariness, the surpassing greatness of my power? Can you name one thing, Paul? Well, now that you put it that way, checkmate. See, I went out to manage my contradiction. I went out to manage the emotions of contradiction. I went to manage my internal atmosphere that was giving way to some other things and bring myself center back to the pillar of fire and let it redefine my reality. And by the time I was getting home, I was waiting for some of my neighbors to step out of their doors and say, who's that guy shouting? Who's that guy dancing down the street? Who's that guy singing? Oh, it's that weird pastor. Yeah. Lives down the road from us, you know. And I realized that by the time I got home, I did that same walk that I do so many. I did it in record time. I was walking fast. I was walking with God. I came into his force, his energy, his confidence, his glory, his excitement. And I really do believe that the Lord is saying that one of the greatest antidotes to our contradiction is celebration. We need to start celebrating, start dancing, start declaring, start eating cake. See, when those in tyrannical power say, let them eat cake, you know, that's a put down. But when our God says, let them eat cake, he's inviting us to celebrate in advance, like dessert first. And I really believe as we go into this next year, we have some choices in front of us, but there are some prophetic things that we need to do to start declaring it's going to be good. We're not going to die. We're going to live. We're not going to lose. We're going to be blessed. We're moving into increase because God has spoken some amazing words over this next year. I personally believe there's going to be some exciting news coming out of Washington, D.C. I don't know when, but it's going to shock the world. Unfortunately, it's going to shock a lot of Christians too, who had already given up. Yeah. Our God has said, fret not because of evildoers, be not envious of wrongdoers, for they will wither quickly like the grass and fade like the green herb. I believe that God is trying to bring his whole church into a whole new school of overcoming evil. how to reign in the midst of evil and watch evildoers fall. For he said, for evildoers will certainly be cut off, never rise again. But the church in America doesn't know what that looks like. We've never seen it. We've never understood all this, but God is about to display himself. And he's going to change our mind about a lot of things. And there's going to be a lot of celebration going on. That's my plan. So I'm buying in some new stock, Betty Crocker, and cake mixes, Aunt Jemima. Yeah, it's called insider trading. It's somebody who's going to take you a while to get that one, but okay. Well, I'm just going to leave that with you. I don't know what you're going to do with it, but I'm going to head into the other room over there, and I'm going to have cake. We have 2 big cakes sitting over there, and I'm planning on having a sugar fix in the name of Jesus. All right, let's stand. Thank you, Lord, thank you for your goodness, your glory. Can you just right now, before we leave here, can you just tell the Lord why you know he's good and what you're expecting him to be like in this next year? Just say it with your mouth. Make a declaration over this next year. This is what I will see. I'm not into contradiction. I'm passing the test. Whew. And I know I will be rejoicing, but so I'm going to just start rejoicing right now. For the Lord is good, and his love endures forever. Woo! Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Oh. Okay. So if anybody here is having a problem with kidneys, and you even have been having some blood in your urine, that'll really mark you. You'll know that we're talking about you. Come down here and get prayer. We're going to have our prayer team come down and get prayer, and God will heal you. We watched him heal a lot of kidneys. So come on down and get prayer for that. God wants to set you free here today. Is God good? You love him? Is he good? All right. Blessings.